All right, students, good afternoon. I will make this brief. This is the review for your first exam. I saw the grades. 2/3 of the class passed, so congratulations to that. But I'm gonna get right to it because I know that you'll have probably follow-up questions. And remember, this Thursday is our guest lecture. Guest lecture with the Black Pre-Law panel. Attendance is required, but I will also throw in a little bonus for this exam if a certain percentage of the class comes. We'll figure it out in an email after this. Okay, so let me get started. So just to start off, there are about there are 5 questions that are, well, first of all the questions on the exam are good questions. Some years I have bad questions or bad answers. I went through the entire exam, all of them are good questions. However, there are 5 questions that the exam may have marked as the correct answer and they were not the correct answer. So let me go through the exam. Prigg versus Pennsylvania, 1842. And I'm not sure if the exam is in this order for you guys, but what I will do is copy and paste the exam questions and send it to you. I may have to send it through my Gmail if it does not do it through the U of H system. Okay, so Prigg versus Pennsylvania of 1842. Answer choices are: the Pennsylvania Supreme Court held the Pennsylvania law unconstitutional as a denial of both the right of slaveholders to recover their slaves under Article 4 and the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. B, the Supremacy Clause. C, it's a decision resulting from the enactment of personal liberty laws in northern states. Or D, B and C only. The answer to this question is D. It's not A because it was not the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that held the Pennsylvania law unconstitutional. It was the United States Supreme Court, the highest court of the land. B, it is the Supremacy Clause because remember, the Supremacy Clause states that the U.S. Constitution trumps state law. And in Prigg versus Pennsylvania, we have Pennsylvania enacting personal liberty laws or state laws that kind of circumvent the Fugitive Slave Act, meaning requiring you to give more than what the Fugitive Slave Law and the Fugitive Slave Act require. C, it is also a decision resulting from the enactment of personal liberty laws in northern states. Therefore, the correct answer choice is B and C. I have to keep moving this because it is falling, so forgive me for 1 second. All right, question number 2 on my end is Mumbet 1781. A, the Delaware Constitution of 1780, which proclaimed that all individuals were born free and equal, nullified the slave system. B, decided that Elizabeth Freeman was free and ordered the former master to compensate her. Or C, A and B but not D. Or D, none of the above. Well, I can tell you the answer choice is not A because it wasn't the Delaware Constitution of 1780, it was the Massachusetts Constitution. So the answer choice is B. In Mumbet, the Massachusetts court decided that Elizabeth Freeman was free and ordered her former master to compensate her. In this question, I believe that this is one of the questions where the answer choice should have been A, and if you chose it, the computer may have marked it wrong. The reason why I go over the exam before I give a formal exam review is because I usually go in and manually grade the answers. So if that's one of those questions, all students will go in and get the points. So keep that in mind. Constitutional slavery clauses. A, Fugitive Slave Clause, 3/5 Clause, 13th Amendment. Of course not. Not U.S. We haven't even talked about the 13th Amendment in class. B, Fugitive Slave Clause, 3/5 Clause, 1808 Clause. That's the correct answer. Let's talk about why it's not C or D. C says Fugitive Slave Clause, 3/5 Clause, Full Faith and Credit Clause. Whether you know about the Full Faith and Credit Clause or not, that's not something we discussed in class. Full Faith and Credit pretty much states that the laws and judgments that apply in one state must be recognized by another state. When we have discussions or issues of recognizing certain types of marriage, like gay marriage, prior to the 2005 Supreme Court decision. It's one of those things where people get married in California and want it recognized in Texas. And there's a huge battle of full faith and credit. But we didn't talk about that as a slavery clause. And it's not D, because we did not talk about the supremacy clause as being one of the slavery clauses. Question 4. Consider the events leading directly or indirectly to the Civil War. Which of the following is not an event leading up to the Civil War? A, the decline of the Underground Railroad. B, the Dred Scott decision. C, the Plessy versus Ferguson decision. Or D, all of the above events. Now, I know I use examples of different cases in class, but you have open notes, open book. We did not talk about Plessy versus Ferguson leading up to the Civil War. Even if you Google Plessy versus Ferguson, you would see that the case happened after the Civil War. So the answer was, which of the following is not an event leading up to the Civil War? The answer is the Plessy versus Ferguson event. So the Missouri Compromise of 1820, A, prohibited slavery in areas lying north of 3630 north latitude. B, was declared unconstitutional by the Dred Scott decision. C, admitted Missouri and Maine as slave states. Well, we know that what the compromise did was admit one slave state and admit one free state. So it admitted Missouri as a slave state. It admitted Maine as a free state. And the last answer choice is all of the above are accurate. All of the above are not accurate. So this is actually a question that is thrown out for being a bad question. So everyone got the Missouri Compromise of 1820 question correct. Number 6, Dred Scott versus Sanford. A, expressly stated that a free Negro of African race whose ancestors are brought in this country and sold a slave is not a citizen within the meaning of the Constitution. B, Chief Justice Taney wrote the majority opinion. C, ruled that Dred Scott was not free because of fugitive slave law of 1850. No, what we expressly talked about in this case is that, well, first of all, Dred Scott did not escape. That's what the fugitive slave law applies to. We know that Chief Justice Taney wrote the majority opinion. I dropped it at some point. Also, you Google it, you can look that Chief Justice Taney wrote the opinion. But because this class is not based on everything you can Google, but what we talk about and what's assigned in the book or what's posted online, this is one of the questions that I will go ahead and give points to. So we have our Missouri Compromise of 1820 points, and we also have our Dred Scott points. So everybody will get 5 points for each of those questions. Question number 7. What year were the African slaves brought to Jamestown? 1622, 1620, 1619, 1621. I never remember this off the top of my head, but this is one that I've used since fall of 2012. The computer has marked that correct answer. Question number 8, the fugitive slave clause. A, all of the below. B, had the effect of leading to the creation of the Underground Railroad. Had the effect of creating a right for masters or persons in bondage to retrieve the people who had escaped. Had the effect of contributing to free black persons being enslaved. So the answer choice for that question is A, all of the below. Question number 9. Which of the following clauses and or laws were not considered a compromise between the North and Southern states? A, Missouri Compromise of 1820. We know that was a compromise because it admitted Maine as a free state, Missouri as a slave state, and it made the free and slave states equal on both sides. 1808 clause, we talked about how the Constitution was adopted in 1787. So for the purposes of slaveholders, it was just like, okay, well, we get 21 more years to import slaves. And for the purpose of the people who were against slavery, it was just like, okay, well, we'll give them 21 more years, but we'll stop it at some point. So that's considered a compromise. C, the 3/5 compromise, we talk about taxation and representation, how blacks were counted, not 3/5 of a person, but for every 5 blacks, only 3 were counted. So it could benefit the South for representation purposes, and so it can benefit the North for having higher tax purposes for the larger states. So D, all of the above were considered compromises between the North and the South. Question 10. During the 1600s, the difference between black slaves and white indentured servants. This question is asking you, what's the difference between black people and white people? A, enslaved Africans could easily blend into the surrounding white population by escaping? No. B, white indentured servants could easily run away? Possibly. If you don't know the answer off the bat, that's a possible. C, white indentured servants could not marry? That wasn't true. D, A and B, but not C? We already said A isn't true. Or E, all of the above. If A is not true and C is not true, then the answer is B. Question number 11. I'm going to take a little water break. Which of the following was not rationale the Dred Scott Court used to support their decision that Africans are not citizens? The United States Constitution, the 13 colonies, the Declaration of Independence, or the 13th Amendment? So this is a question that says, hey, one of these are the answer. Not all, not none, but one of them. So think about the Dred Scott decision, which was 1857. Think about the Constitution, 1787, 13 colonies prior to 1776, Declaration of Independence, 1776. And think about when the 13th Amendment was passed. 13th Amendment was passed in 1865. Wait, voting rights, Yeah, 1865. So the 13th Amendment, which was passed in 1865, could not have been a rationale for Dred Scott, which was passed in 1857. So the following that was not a rationale, 13th Amendment. Question 12. What is not a logical effect of the enactment of the Missouri Compromise of 1820? So what we remember from Missouri Compromise of 1820 is that, let's just say this is Missouri, and it put a line, 3630 parallel, that says no slavery above this line, except Missouri, okay? So in addition to doing that, it stated that Missouri is going to remain a slave state, or they're going to be admitted into the Union as a slave state, and Maine will be the free state. So with that in mind, answer choices. A, the slave population in the South increased. We're looking for something that's not a logical effect. B, that activity in the Underground Railroad movement gained momentum. C, slave catchers crossed state lines to capture runaway slaves. Or D, slavery population decreased overall in the U.S. The answer choice is D. In R versus Knowles, ex parte Somerset, which is our case from the first day of class that Miss Tiffany Seaburn taught, A, the Court of King's Bench decided that Somerset was an American slave who must be returned to Charles Stuart. Nope. Court of King's Bench decided that no master was allowed to take a slave by force to be sold abroad because he had deserted from his service. If you go back and you read the case, you're like, well, he did run away, so I'll put a pin in that one. So C, the Court of King's Bench decided that slavery was unconstitutional in England. Well, that's true, but it was decided before that case came about. D, the Court of King's Bench decided that the law of American colonies applied to escaped slaves in England. No, because Somerset was eventually freed, and in America, if you run away, then that doesn't make you necessarily free, even though we don't have the fugitive slave law at that time. A, B, C. This is one with a lot of answer choices. A, B, C, D, E. All the answers are correct. Or F, C, D, E. Really F. The Court of King's Bench decided that since positive law preserves the institution of slavery, Somerset must be returned to Charles Stuart. So everything that returns this slave back to Charles Stuart or back to his master is wrong. So that takes out F. If it takes out F, it takes out E, which says all correct answers are correct, which means it takes out D because it's saying American laws apply in England. And it takes out A, which says that he was an American slave who must be returned to Charles Stuart. So now we have between B and C. In B, it says the Court of King's Bench decided that no master was allowed to take a slave by force to be sold abroad because he had deserted from his service. C says the Court of King's Bench decided that slavery was unconstitutional in England. That case did not decide it. That case said that slavery was unconstitutional in England, but they did not decide that matter in that case. the Court of King's Bench decided that since slavery was unconstitutional in England, that the master could not take a slave by force. So the answer is B. Question number 14. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. A, all answers are correct. B, gave promotions and bonuses to officials who assisted in slave capture. C, allowed slaves to testify on their behalf. D, only B. Or E, none of the answers are correct. Now, so remember the difference between the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 and the one prior to that is the 1851 is like saying, hey, you know what? We have the Rachel versus Walker case where a slave can sue for their freedom. We have the momentum of the Underground Railroad. What we need to do is increase penalties for people who are helping slaves. And we also need to be able to reward people who are helping capture slaves. So, no, it didn't allow slaves to testify on their behalf. And if it did not allow slaves to testify, all of the answers can't be correct. So that knocks out your A, that knocks out your C. It did give promotions and bonuses to officials who assisted in slave capture. So you know you got one of those answers correct. And so if one of them is a correct answer, you know that E, which says none of the answers are correct, is not a correct answer. So now we have knocked out 3 out of the 5. B says gave promotions and bonuses to officials who assisted in slave capture. D says only B. So it says the same thing. So in that case, if you chose B or D, you got the answer correct. 15. How did the ruling on the Dred Scott case affect the slavery debate? And so what is this saying? It's asking you what happened to the issue of slavery after the Dred Scott case stated that persons of African descent will never be citizens of the United States, and persons of African descent or slaves are not citizens within the meaning of the Constitution, therefore they can't bring lawsuits. What did that do to the whole framework of slavery? Did it A, give Congress the power to decide if slavery would exist in states? No. Because you remember we have this whole Missouri Compromise that stated no slaves over this line right here. Okay, that's fine, but Missouri Compromise was declared unconstitutional in Dred Scott. So A is not correct. B, did it protect the right of a slave to file a suit? No. Dred Scott specifically said slaves are not citizens within the meaning of the Constitution and they can't bring lawsuits. C, did it sustain the argument that freeing a slave by going into a territory was a violation of slaveholders' due process rights? That was a little wordy, so you may want to put a pin in that one. And go to the last one. D, it united pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces. No, not at all. So even if you can't understand C by reading it initially, you know it didn't unite pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces after Dred Scott. It got worse, the Civil War. So what does C mean? It sustained the argument that freeing a slave by going to territory was a violation of slaveholders' due process rights. I give that example by saying we have cars in Texas, and let's say Louisiana says that private individuals can't have cars. And as soon as you cross over into the Louisiana state line, they take your car. You're like, wait, what? That's my car. You're taking my property. That's how it felt for a slave master. That's their argument when they were called on these assignments to go to the territories, which is free. These territories were army bases. They were called there on assignments. They took their slaves, and by way of going to these territories, their slaves were now free. The court said, no, that's a violation of their due process. Remember, you can have your life, liberty, and property taken away from you, but you have to have process of the law. And by going there, they did not get process of the law just because their slaves were free. So the answer was C. 16. As a result of the Dred Scott decision, I'm asking you to fill in the blank pretty much. A, the Southern defense of slavery was made the law of the land. B, Dred Scott was allowed to be free. C, owning slaves was no longer a right of property. Or D, Congress could ban slavery in the states. The question before this one, if you guys have these together, is literally the same question. So Dred Scott was not allowed to be free. Owning slaves was no longer a right of the property. I mean, that's not what they decided. And Congress could ban slavery in the states. That's not true, because the Missouri Compromise was struck down. The Southern defense of slavery was made the law of the land, because when the Supreme Court stated that Africans cannot sue for freedom, they pretty much said, well, not Africans, but slaves could not sue for freedom. They pretty much said, you are a slave. This is your position. That's the defense of slavery. 17. The Massachusetts Supreme Court used the same rationale in Quackwalker as it did in Mumbet to rule that slaves are not free. True or false? The answer is false, because in Quackwalker and Mumbet, they ruled that slaves were free. This is the one where you got to watch what it's asking you. Question 18. Dred Scott sued for his freedom while he was in a free state. That answer is false. I think the exam marked it correct. If you marked it true and you got it correct, you didn't get it correct. The answer is false. So Dred Scott sued for his freedom while he was in the state of Missouri. He waited till he got back to Missouri, and remember, Missouri is a slave state by way of the Missouri Compromise. Okay, 2 more to go. Question 19. Rachel, a woman of color versus Walker was a case about an escaped slave suing for freedom for being taken into a free territory by her master. True or false? The answer is false. She never escaped. She just waited till she got back. Question 20. 20 African slaves were brought to Plymouth Rock, Virginia in 1620. True or false? It was false. It wasn't Plymouth Rock. Okay, so just a brief recap on things that you will get credit for. There's that Missouri Compromise question. Where I believe that, prohibited slavery declared unconstitutional and admitted many Missouri slaves. So everyone's get credit for question 5, or I don't know if it's your question 5, but it's the one asking about the Missouri Compromise of 1820. And then the Dred Scott, everyone is going to get yes, everyone's going to get credit for the Dred Scott versus Sanford question. And you're getting credit for those questions because more than one answer is correct. And the only other answer besides those multiple answers that are correct are all of the above. But there's generally a wrong answer within there. So everyone will have 10 points added to their exam for question 5 and question 6. Those who marked Dred Scott sued for freedom while in a free state and chose true will have that question subtracted. That question should have been false. Okay. And also the question asking about the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, the one that says gave promotions and bonuses to officials who assisted in slave capture, or only B. If you chose gave promotions and bonuses, or the answer choice that said only B, you will get credit for those. If you chose all the answers are correct, you will not get credit. If you chose none of the answers are correct, you will not get credit. If you chose allowed slaves to testify on their behalf, you will not get credit. Okay, I think there was one more. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, you can email me. If you have any questions about the exam specifically, or your exam specifically, we can go over them. Remember, we will not be meeting in our regular classroom on Thursday, October the 11th at 2:30. We will be in Agnes Arnold, room 200 and something. I will post it on Blackboard. Enjoy the rest of your week.